What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Martian MMA podcast. I'm your host, and my name is John. And this week, we will be analyzing and predicting the 13 fights going down this Saturday night from Sunrise, Florida, headlined by Jacare Souza versus Jack Hermansson. Towards the end of the podcast, we will also be recapping the UFC St. Petersburg card that went down this past Saturday. But starting things off, we will be breaking down each and every one of the 13 fights going down on ESPN. ESPN regular and ESPN Plus. They made it really easy for us fans, just like the UFC always does. Around 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time, we will be kicking things off with 3 fights on ESPN2, then moving to ESPN at 7 p.m. for 4 fights, and then moving to ESPN Plus for 6 fights, kicking off at 9 p.m. Eastern. So going to be doing a lot of channel changes throughout the program, but that's never stopped us UFC fans before, and it won't stop us this time. So we're going to start things off in the welterweight division. We got Court McGee, who is 19-7, taking on Diego Lima, who is 13-7, and the opening betting line for this one was Court McGee minus 185, Diego Lima plus 145. Looking over at our affiliated sportsbook, 5 dimes. Right now, the line's almost identical. Court McGee minus 165 to Lima at plus 145. So, like I said, line staying almost the same in this one. It's a close matchup, but I would definitely agree with Court McGee being the favorite. Although Diego Lima did probably have the best performance of his career in his last fight when he knocked out Chad Laprise with that left hook that sent Laprise to the canvas. One-shot knockout, walk-off KO. Really impressive performance from Lima in that fight, but I just think that might be a little bit of an anomaly in his career. I think he's been a pretty average fighter throughout most of his career. He got back in the UFC from The Ultimate Fighter, and now he's kind of chugging along. He had a tough fight against Yushin Okami where he was taken down a lot in that fight. Taken down off his leg kicks, taken down when he was overextended in his punches on his combinations. And Yushin Okami really implicated a super grappling heavy game plan and beat Diego Lima very decisively in their fight just about a year ago. So you got to think that Court McGee will try to implicate the same type of wrestling game plan to beat Lima in this fight this weekend. McGee can hit an offensive takedown of his own. He does have a little bit of inexperience with, I wouldn't say inexperience, but just recklessness on the ground. When Alex Garcia was pushing him up against the cage, he tried to do 2 judo throws to try to shuck Garcia off of him, but it actually exposed his back in that moment. It was a pretty dangerous moment in that fight. So I wouldn't be too sure that McGee is going to flawlessly execute a grappling game plan as easily as Yushin Okami did. I think that Court McGee has good scrambles. He can stuff a takedown. He has, just good wrestling overall. And his striking is pretty good as well. He was able to drop Alex Garcia with a jab in their most recent fight. He did have some trouble with Sean Strickland pretty recently where he was, taken down off a leg kick in that fight, but leg kicks are a big part of his game plan. So sometimes you're going to get taken down off of them, and he just struggled to get off his back in that fight against Sean Strickland and was just a step behind that entire fight, but picked up a nice decision victory over Alex Garcia in his last fight. So both these guys are coming off a win. I think it should be a good fight. I hope that Diego Lima has worked on his takedown defense a lot, and then it could be a pretty competitive fight on the feet where I actually think Lima might have a chance at winning this fight via decision or possibly sparking McGee like he did Chad Laprise. But if the grappling starts going in favor of Court McGee, I expect him to grind out a decision, against the cage, working them takedowns, mixing up his striking with his takedowns and winning this fight maybe 29-20 in the scorecard. So I slightly lean in the direction of Court McGee. So next fight in the women's strawweight division, we have Angela Hill, who is 8-6, taking on Jodie Esquibel, who is 6-4. The opening betting line for this one was Angela Hill, the minus 210 favorite to Jodie Esquibel at plus 160. Right now, over on 5 dimes, we are seeing Angela Hill minus 580 to Jodie Esquibel at plus 440. Let me repeat that. Angela Hill is minus 580 versus Jodie Esquibel, who is plus 440. So even though she opened as a 2-1 favorite, Angela Hill now sits at almost 6-1 over Jodie Esquibel in this fight. Now, It is a great matchup for Angela Hill. You know, I'm a big fan of Angela Hill. You have been for a while. She took this fight on short notice. You know, she had a pretty big setback in the last fight. Randa Marcos just got dominated in that fight, taken down, held down, and tapped out by Marcos in one round with that armbar. One of Marcos' best performances of her career, but still, Hill, you know, she knew it was coming. She knew that Marcos was trying to grapple with her, but she could not stop that attack. And you know, with how short that fight was, you know, it's pretty hard to make any improvements from the time of that last fight until now. But she's not really fighting or grappling in this fight at all. Jodie Escobar is actually a former boxer. She really has not adapted her game to MMA well at all. She's got bad footwork. She even her boxing is not very good at all. She leans into combos and puts her head in, you know, dangerous spots, and she doesn't have much experience in the clinch. You know, the Muay Thai clinch is not something that's very popular in boxing. So, you know, she's uncomfortable in that clinch, and she was actually supposed to fight Angela Hill's teammate Jessica Penne in this one. And I thought Penne is, you know, an expert at the clinch in terms of women's MMA. So I thought that Penne would be winning that fight all day in the clinch, just, you know, kneeing Escobar to the body and just keeping her in that clinch, and maybe putting her on her back, because, like I said, Escobar has not adapted her MMA game well at all. She's primarily striking. She doesn't stuff a takedown well. She doesn't move well. She's, you know, a very, very low-level fighter, and her 6-4 record speaks for that. So Angela Hill, even though she's coming off of a pretty bad loss, she, you know, might not have been 100% in shape for this fight. She knew what kind of opponent she was up against. She knew it's an easy win. She knows it's a very easy style matchup for her. And Angela Hill, you know, should go out here and win it with her kickboxing. Angela Hill's got, you know, very good kickboxing, good output. She can clinch herself pretty well. Definitely got a Muay Thai base where she throws knees, kicks, elbows. And she never stops coming forward, so she's going to be constantly in Escobar's face, and I think that she'll just be landing the more diverse offensive attack, mixing it up with leg kicks, head kicks, working that clinch, getting the knees, elbows, and of course her punches as well. So I think that Angela Hill will win this fight very decisively, and the 6-1 favorite line speaks volumes to that. But you know, the people who are laying chalk on Angela Hill, man, check yourself into rehab, because you know that this is just not the spot to lay that chalk. So next fight is in the lightweight division. We got Jim Miller, who is 29-13, taking on Jason Gonzalez, who is 11-4. The opening betting line for this one was Jim Miller, the -155 favorite, to Jason Gonzalez at +115. Right now, over on our affiliated sportsbook, 5dimes.eu, we see Jim Miller -142, Gonzalez at +120. So line margins tightening up. Two-way action coming in on this fight. You know, this is a great fight on paper. You got a very experienced veteran in Jim Miller, who, although he is up there in age and he's got, you know, 40 Zuffa fights or something like that, he's still, you know, I wouldn't say a fresh fighter, but he's still got some very legitimate skills behind him. And you saw that most recently in the Alex White fight. You know, Alex White came into that fight the favorite, and Jim Miller landed that straight left down the pipe, broke his nose, took the back, and choked Alex White out in that fight. He's got, you know, Jim Miller's got great fundamentals. His jiu-jitsu is really good. He's a black belt in jiu-jitsu. He's got good back takes. He can attack off of his back. And his boxing fundamentals are great as well. That, like I mentioned, that straight left hand that he clipped Alex White with. And he's had competitive fights with Dustin Poirier not even 2 years ago or something like that. So Jim Miller is, you know, although he is declining, he's fighting that Lyme's disease. He's, you know, he's definitely had his fair share of setbacks in his career. He's still a very dangerous opponent, and, you know, he's taken on a very dangerous opponent of his own in Jason Gonzalez. Gonzalez has, you know, struggled with activity a little bit. He's only had, you know, his most recent fight was against Gregor Gillespie in September of 2017. So, you know, almost 2 years away from the octagon, a year and a half. You got to wonder what that is about. I do not actually have a reason why he was out. I think, you know, his injuries and whatnot. It wasn't any USADA suspension, but he, you know, had a nice choke over J.C. Cantrell, being his lone win in the UFC. Suffered setbacks with Drew Dober and Gillespie, but I think he gave Gregor Gillespie his, you know, his most competitive fight that he's had in the so far. Gillespie is just a relentless pressure fighter with incredible wrestling and, you know, a ton of power, and Gonzalez was willing to trade with him, was willing to get in that pocket and swing. So, he did a good job defending the takedowns as well. He eventually did get taken down at certain times by Gillespie. The world class wrestler that Gillespie is. But Gonzalez had his moments where he looked competent defending the takedowns. He had digging for a wizard or an underhook. He's definitely got some good credentials in the wrestling realm of things. But when he hurts you on the feet, that he gets wild, man. When he's willing to trade in that pocket and he's swinging punches. If he thinks that he'll hit you or he hit you clean, he'll sense it and he'll rush you and he'll get reckless. That's what happened versus Gillespie. When sometimes he would land a good shot on Gregor, and then Gregor would or Gonzalez would swarm in on Gregor, and then Gillespie would get that takedown, and then Gonzalez would get stuck on his back, and Gillespie could clear his head for a little bit. And that's eventually why Gillespie was able to eventually take Gonzalez down, get the mount, and then get the arm triangle on Gonzalez. But that was an incredible back and forth fight, man. Gonzalez was game in that fight. He is willing. He showed that he's willing to engage in a firefight. He's got a good head kick, man. He hit Gregor with some good head kicks in that fight. He's got good punches. He's confident in his chin and his defense because he's willing to trade in that pocket. Not the most solid defensively, but I think he's got a very good diverse striking attack. He can hit you with knees, kicks, punches, all types of stuff. It's going to be a tough fight for both gentlemen. I think it's a really close type of fight. Where the odds are right now, I think it's pretty much perfect. I do give that slight edge to Jim Miller because he's got that experience about him. He's so technically sound on the feet and on the ground. It only takes real specialists, guys like Dan Hooker who are incredible strikers, or guys like Charles Oliveira who are incredible grapplers to beat Jim Miller easily. But typical well-rounded martial artists like Dustin Poirier, Anthony Pettis, these guys had tough fights with Jim Miller pretty recently. So I think that it's really hard to make a pick in this one. I think it'll be whoever wins this fight will be a 29-28 decision. Although if you look at the fight doesn't go the distance in this one, it's minus 260. So I might end up betting fight goes the decision in this one. I think that they're both fairly evenly matched. I think that both Gonzalez starts fast and he hasn't gone to the decision yet in the UFC, but I think this will be his first fight where he does. I think that he'll be tested. This will be an up and down type of fight, but I think that Jim Miller will edge out the scorecards 29-28 in this one. But it's a pass in the betting window, and I'd say it's a dogger pass just because Gonzalez could have made massive improvements over the past 18 months. Miller did suffer that quick loss in his last fight, and I just wouldn't lay favorite chalk on Jim Miller at this stage in his career, but I am picking him to win this fight. The next fight is also in the lightweight division. We got Gilbert Burns, who is 14-3, taking on Mike Davis, who is 7-1. The opening betting line for this one was Gilbert Burns, the minus 270 favorite to Mike Davis at plus 190. Right now we are seeing over on 5 Dimes, Gilbert Burns minus 255 to Mike Davis at plus 215. I agree with where this line is set. I think Gilbert Burns put on the best performance of his career in his last fight against Oliver Aubin Mercier. He just put on a very well-rounded performance where he showed off his boxing. We know that Burns can hit hard for a while. He's knocked a bunch of dudes out. Dan Moret comes to mind as being the most recent one, where he just blitzes you in the pocket and he swings. And you thought he was kind of a wild striker, but that fight against OAM revealed that he's technical, man. He has good defense. He can time counter shots. He can He's really crafty in the pocket. He can slip that right hook right over his opponent's left shoulder, and that's what he was hitting OAM with a lot in that fight. He was able to drop OAM with a couple punches in that fight. So not only is boxing, he's got good body kicks. He's able to blast the double leg, man. His entries to takedowns are really, really high level. Burns is primarily a jiu-jitsu guy. Yeah, that's definitely his base of things. And jiu-jitsu guys tend to struggle with their takedowns a little bit because that's just the way things go in the jiu-jitsu community. People who are accustomed to starting on the ground, they neglect their takedowns a little bit. But man, Gilbert Burns' entries are really, really good. He can chain together takedowns. and he will get you to the mat, and he will keep you there. He will threaten with a submission. He's got good top pressure. He can hit you with some ground and pound. He can scramble, and all of that was evident in the OAM fight. Just really impressive. I went back and rewatched that fight, and I just didn't remember how dominant it was for Gilbert Burns in that fight. And I think he was an underdog in that fight. So that's really shown what the price tag, behind that minus 255 price tag behind Burns is in this fight. But he's taken on a very legitimate opponent in Mike Davis, a guy who was coming off the Contender Series, not fresh off the Contender Series. He actually lost his fight on the Contender Series last year to Sadiq Youssef in a fairly competitive fight. People claim that fight was the best fight on Tuesday Night Contender Series history. Well, I don't know if that's the case, but if it is true in your mind, then that's then the Tuesday Night Contender Series has produced some pretty weak fights, because that wasn't really that good of a fight in my mind. I think Davis was game. He was there to he was there to fight. But man, Sadiq Youssef was just a step ahead of him the entire fight. And I'd like to know if that fight was at 45 or 55, because Sadiq Youssef currently fights at 45, while Mike Davis is taking this fight at 55, so it'll be. Let me see if I can find that in the meantime. But after he had that setback on the Tuesday Night Contender Series, he took a couple fights in island fights against some lower level competition. 9-7 record, 3-1 record. And then he was able to pick up a couple finishes over them, and now he got the call back into the UFC for this short notice fight versus Gilbert Burns. So that fight was at 45 versus Sadiq Youssef. Man, I have no idea how Mike Davis made 45. I honestly thought he was a lightweight when I watched that fight versus Youssef, and Youssef was the one who dropped down. But it'll be interesting. Mike Davis at 55, he might be fully hydrated now. He might feel better than ever, not having to cut that extra 10 pounds. It could be big, but it's just going to be tough for him to match up against Gilbert Burns in this one. I think in the grappling department, even though Davis does seem to have some decent grappling credentials, he actually got hurt in one of his most recent fights with a spinning kick to the body, and he recognized he was hurt. He took his opponent down. He had some good top pressure, and then he Kimura'd him pretty soon afterwards. But, on the feet, man, I'm expecting some wild exchanges in this one. Burns is willing to trade, and Davis is really willing to trade. He loves standing in that pocket. He loves, just throwing bombs with the hands, man. He did get dropped by Youssef with the right hand in that fight. So, his look out for his chin to maybe be a little bit better at 55. Maybe that 10 pounds of weight cutting was draining his chin, or you could take it as that the 45ers are testing that chin of Davis. The 55ers are definitely going to test that chin of Davis. So you could take that either way. That's what we were talking about with Holloway. I was concerned about Holloway's ability to take shots at 45. He had a great chin at 45, but how would he be able to reflect or react to those shots at 55? It was a lot different. So that's always going to be something to look out for when someone is moving up in weight. But I think that this, as long as this one stays on the feet, it actually will be competitive. I expect some good boxing exchanges. Both of these guys, have decent head movement and good defense, and should be willing to trade in the pocket and produce some exciting exchanges in this one. But if this fight hits the canvas, I just think that Gilbert Burns will be 2 steps ahead of Mike Davis the entire time. Not 1 step ahead, 2 steps ahead. I mean, it's just a huge difference between these two gentlemen when it comes to the ground. And I think that Davis's best chance is stuffing that takedown and trying to hurt Burns with a punch on the feet, while Burns, I think, could win this fight anywhere. I think he could outbox Mike Davis on the feet, be hitting him with that powerful leg kick, that left body kick, and then mixing it up with the punches. Or he can mix in those takedowns and, get some top control, threaten with the submission. I just really expect a dominant performance from Gilbert Burns in this one. I'm not completely counting Mike Davis out. I'm not saying he should be, minus or plus 400 or anything. I think where the odds are pretty accurate, but I would be very shocked to see Mike Davis win this fight, and if he does get this one done, I expect it to be by knockout on the feet. But I'm going to pick Gilbert Burns to get this one done by 3rd round finish. Don't know if it's a submission or a knockout, but 3rd round finish for Gilbert Burns in this fight. Next fight is taking place in the women's strawweight division. We got Carla Esparza, who is 13-6, taking on Vernie Jandiroba, who is 14-0. The opening betting line for this one was Carla Esparza as the -145 favorite to Jane Jardoba at +125. Looking over at our affiliated sportsbook 5dimes.eu, we are seeing Carla Esparza +100 to Jane Jardoba at the -120 favorite. So the line has flipped. I definitely agree with the line movement in this one. It's just it is going to be a very close fight because both women are, I'd say primarily grapplers. I think Jane Jardoba might be the better grappler at this point in her career, while Esparza is the better striker at this point in their career. Both of these women are very, very experienced. Jane Jardoba was an Invicta champion. She has gone the full 5 rounds fairly recently, too. She picked up a victory over Mitsuki Inoue in March of 2018. She also picked up a nice arm triangle finish over an opponent, Jenny Samordrin, in September of this year. That fight was scheduled for 5 rounds. So, Jane Jardoba has actually taken a step down in I wouldn't say competition, but she's fighting 15 minutes instead of 25 minutes this time. So that's got to be a huge confidence booster for her. She knows that her gas tank is good enough to go for 5 rounds, so she can, really put her foot on the gas for this 3-round fight. All right, so let's talk about how this fight will plan out. I actually think I have a pretty clear idea of how this fight will go. But, of course, I could be wrong. So, Jane Jardoba, her striking is not very good. She does not throw much offense, but I think that she knows her striking isn't very good. She doesn't try to do more than she can. She's, kind of focused on defense. She's trying to stay at range. She doesn't really engage much. And her bread and butter is the takedown, is the top pressure, is the ground and pound, the guard passing, and the submissions. That's Jane Jardoba's world. That's where she's won most of her fights, and that's where she became a world champion over in Invicta. Esparza at one point was also, using her grappling to become a world champion as well. The first women's strawweight champion in the UFC. But, since then, her grappling, I think, has looked a little bit sloppier. I think the division has kind of caught up to her a little bit, especially in that last fight against Tatiana Suarez, man. She took a thrashing from Tatiana Suarez in that last fight, just taken down and absolutely mauled on the ground by the female Khabib. So, but the good thing about Esparza is that her stand-up has been getting a little better. She, was able to drop Claudia Gadelha with a punch when they fought recently. She was able to outstrike Cynthia Calvillo to a decision, and, had a lot of grappling in that fight as well. But, the one problem with Esparza is that she gets excited on the feet sometimes, and she starts running forward and throwing sloppy combos with her feet, aren't set. They're just, it's like a typical, women's MMA sequence when you can imagine when someone you think is hurt and they're backing up and the person is just running, throwing punches and with, all emotion and no technique behind it. Esparza does that constantly, man. So I think that Jane Jardoba will be waiting on the outside, trying to stay at kicking range, and then just waiting for Esparza to get impatient and throw one of those sloppy combos, and then Jane Jardoba is going to duck under, level change, and take Esparza down. Now, Esparza does have great wrestling. She can scramble really well. Gadelha, Calvillo, neither of those girls were able to hold Esparza down. So, it's going to be tough for Jane Jardoba, but, man, I've just been really impressed with Jane Jardoba, man. She passes guard. She's active on the ground. She's not looking to stall. She's not looking to, that could be a little bit of a detriment to her in this fight, though, because if she gives Esparza a little bit of room to escape or to, try to hip escape or elbow escape or push off the hip and try to get back to her feet, that could happen in this fight if Jane Jardoba goes for that guard pass or goes for that ground and pound. She really likes using those elbows and that ground and pound. So, I do think that Jane Jardoba will get this fight to the floor. It's just a matter of how good Esparza can scramble. But if Esparza gets stuck on her back, man, I think that will be all she wrote. I think that Jane Jardoba will punish her on the ground. It could be similar to the Tatiana Suarez fight where, Esparza just stuck on bottom and she's just getting smashed in this one. So it would be an impressive performance from Jane Jardoba to come in here on her debut and beat the former champion like that. And, it might be a little bit hard to lay that favorite money on her coming in here with those high expectations of her. But anybody who got her at plus 125, congratulations too. That's big money, that's a big value right there. But even her as minus 120, man, or wherever the line is right now, I think it's minus 120. It's tempting, man. I really do think Jane Jordova wins this fight. The only circumstances I don't see her winning this fight is if Esparza is able to get off of her back. She's able to stuff or scramble out of the takedowns, and then she's able to keep this fight standing, and then use her boxing in order to win the rounds in this fight. But man, Esparza is just not technically sound enough to keep this fight standing the entire time. Jane Jordova is going to be relentless with that takedown, even if Esparza scrambles out or stuffs a couple takedowns. Jane Jordova is going to be chaining together, going single leg to double leg to body lock to trip. She's got a huge wrestling arsenal. I'm really looking forward to Jane Jordova making her debut, and I'm going to pick her to win this fight by decision. Next fight is taking place in the heavyweight division. We got Andrei Arlovski, who is 27-18, taking on Augusto Sakai, who is 12-1-1. The opening betting line for this one was Sakai minus 130 to Arlovski minus 110, almost a pick'em fight there. But since then, looking over at 5 dimes, much more action coming in on Sakai, pushing him down to minus 150 to Arlovski up at plus 120. And I agree with the line movement in this one. I'm seeing a lot of people betting on Andrei Arlovski at dog money, and it's always tempting. I'm telling you, it's always tempting. Andrei Arlovski's probably been the underdog in his past 7 fights or something like that. Actually, with the good old bestfightodds.com, we can tell. So let's see. He was the underdog against Walt Harris, the underdog against Abdurmanikov, the underdog against Toyovasa, underdog against Struve, against Albini, against Tybura, against Ngannou. Yeah, let's see, 9 fights, 10 fights. You'd have to go back to the Frank Mir fight in 2015 to find one fight where Andrei Arlovski was not the underdog. So just people love betting him as underdog. I'm telling you, man, it's just a habit. And he did come through and win 2 of those fights, the Albini fight and the Struve fight. He won. The Tayavasa fight was real close. He's not a totally shot fighter at this point. But if you look at his last fight against Walt Harris, man, that was one of his worst performances, I think, lately. He has looked pretty bad and, tentative out there, but, man, that Walt Harris fight was bad. He just didn't look like he had any aggression. He didn't look like he was comfortable on the feet with Walt Harris, who Arlovski should be levels ahead of on the feet. Arlovski at one point had a very diverse MMA game where he would, go for submissions a lot on the ground, and he's, really just become a low output, boxing, occasional kick type of fighter. He just likes to keep his fight standing, maybe clinch up with you against the fence, but man, I can't remember the last time Arlovski had a really good fight. I think his fights are always, typically low output where there are a lot of standing and looking at each other, and, you barely know who won which round. And I can't bet on that, especially at plus 130, man. That's just not good enough odds. I was fallen victim to the Arlovski hype train back when he was 2-1 over Albini, or plus 140, or he opened plus 285 against Stefan Struve. So yeah, I can see betting on him in those situations. But in this spot against Sakai, I don't like it, man. Sakai is not a world class heavyweight by any means. He's a pretty fat heavyweight. He's got a huge gut. But he's primarily a boxer. I'd say he had a fairly close fight with Chase Sherman. Sherman, I wouldn't say Sherman ever had him hurt, or Sherman was never really winning. Maybe for a little bit in the first round, Sherman was winning. But Sakai was able to take over that fight late and get the finish in the 3rd round of that fight. Sakai was just, feeling him out in the first round. Sherman was, throwing a lot of strikes and was landing a little bit in the first, 90 seconds, 2 minutes. But, Sherman did gas out pretty hard in that fight, while Sakai was still there and was still throwing hard in front of him. So, although he's primarily boxing, he, occasionally will throw a knee in the clinch. He's got actually a decent body kick and a decent teep, too. That watch out for that left kick of Sakai. It should be a factor in this one, So, both of these guys are just boxing with each other at range. Man, this has split decision written all over it. I expect it to be boring. I expect it to be low output. It'll be brutal to watch at some points. But, it really comes down to which guy is able to use more offensive tools. I think the guy who's working the low kick, who's working the body kick better, will win this fight. It's going to, I think I think Sakai will be the better boxer in this. I just think that he's, the more active fighter. He looked better in his last fight. He threw with, more ill intent, was way more aggressive, and, looks like he just hit harder than Arlovsky. I really don't remember the last time Arlovsky hit someone really hard. It's probably been like 5 fights, but. I just favor Sakai in this one. I'm not talking about betting them. I'm not talking. I'm just sit back and watch this one burn in this one. I don't think it'll be a good fight. I think it will go to the decision. Yeah, -150. So the people are thinking it'll go that way as well. Honestly, Sakai +240 decision. That's not a bad line. So staying away from this one in the betting window, but I'm gonna pick Sakai to win by decision. Next fight is taking place in the welterweight division. We got Ben Saunders, who is 22-11-2, taking on Takashi Sato, who is 14-2. The opening betting line for this one was Takashi Sato, the -165 favorite, to Ben Saunders at +125. Right now, over on 5 Dimes, we are seeing Sato at -192, Saunders at +165. So more action coming in the way of the favorite in Takashi Sato. And, I don't blame people for hopping in the spot against Saunders, because Saunders is definitely a declining fighter. He got, pretty brutally knocked out in his last fight against Lyman Good. His last win was against Jake Ellenberger. He finished him with knees to the body in that fight, but he really hasn't looked too good in the octagon lately. He's got that good jiu-jitsu background, or that good jiu-jitsu base, to go back on, that rubber guard 10th planet system. He can, threaten off of his back. He does have one of the 2 omoplatas in UFC history. He likes working in the clinch, likes throwing knees in the clinch. That's where he did finish Ellenberger with, like I mentioned, but that's where he got finished versus Lyman Good. He was hitting Lyman Good with some knees to the body, but Lyman Good said, "Fuck your knees to the body. I'm throwing uppercuts in this bitch," and put Saunders down, knocked him down with uppercuts, and then just put him in a coffin with hammer fist. A really brutal knockout that Saunders suffered in his last fight. So, getting on to his opponent. Takashi Sato making his UFC debut in this fight. A Japanese fighter fighting most of his fights over in Pancrase. So took a good bit of notes on this one. So I'll just tell you what I saw. He fought an opponent with the last name of Franca. Let me figure out his first name. It's not Hermes Franca. Giaco Franca is the man's name. So he had a real competitive fight with Franca in that one. He lost the first 2 rounds of that fight, but then Sato came back and he won the third. And he was very reminiscent of Nick Diaz in that 3rd round, where he would get you against that cage and he just threw like little pitter patter punches, where he wasn't trying to knock you out. He wasn't trying to beat the brakes off you. He was just trying to wear you down with long combinations of punches, and it did look like Nick Diaz for bits and pieces there. But he unfortunately was taken down in the 4th round of that fight, and he got rear naked choked by Giaco Franca in that fight. But close fight, that was a title fight, 5 rounds. He's not gonna have to go that those five rounds in this fight. So he took on an opponent by the name of Matt Vale in his last fight. I believe this fight was also scheduled for 5-minute rounds as well. Yes, it was. Oh, no, it wasn't. 3 5-minute rounds, non-title fight, main event. But he was able to drop Vale with a straight left hand in that fight, but he was not able to capitalize on it. He was actually taken down shortly after that fight, or shortly after he dropped his opponent with the straight left hand. So not much finishing ability from Sato that I saw. He actually got his back taken right after he hurt his opponent in that fight. So if he is giving up his back versus Ben Saunders, that he's going to be playing risky business with Ben Saunders, who's got that great jiu-jitsu credentials to go to fall back on if he needs to in this fight. So I definitely think Saunders is going to be looking to take this fight to the floor. I think Sato, he does have some good judo throws. He definitely knows what he's doing on the ground, but I do think he's more comfortable on the feet. He's more comfortable striking at distance. But he's not very, very sound on the feet. He got dropped by his opponent, Matt Vale. He got dropped with a left hook in that fight. He's a bit chinny. He can be submitted like we saw in the Franco fight. So I get the people who are betting on betting against Saunders just because it's Saunders, but man, I don't think that Sato is too high level of an opponent. I definitely would not trust my money on him at favorite money, especially at -190. So this is definitely gonna be a dog or pass type of situation. I think this is actually a winnable fight for Ben Saunders. He's definitely not fighting a high level opponent like Lyman Good or like Sergio Moraes in his last 2 losses. He's fighting a little bit more manageable an opponent in this one. So I expect Sato to come out there looking good, but I think Saunders could make this a dirty, not like dirty in the weird type of way. But he'll make this fight grindy type of fight against the cage. He'll take you down. He'll try to go for those submissions, and I think that he actually might get a submission or might get a finish for a knee to the body or knee in the clinch. So I'm going to pick Saunders in this one. I've always liked the guy. He's a 10th planet guy. He's been in the UFC for a long time. I'm cheering for him to get the upset in this one. All right, we are moving on to the main card on ESPN Plus. We got 6 fights starting off in the lightweight division. Roosevelt Roberts, who is 7-0, is taking on Thomas Gifford, who is 17-7. Roosevelt Roberts opened up the favorite at -245 to Thomas Gifford at +175. Right now we are seeing over on 5 dimes. Roosevelt Roberts -380 to Gifford at +315. So a lot of action coming in on the favorite, Roosevelt Roberts, in this one. I don't blame people, man. Roosevelt Roberts has looked impressive so far in what we've seen from him. He picked up a nice victory on the Tuesday Night Contender Series via rear naked choke, and he made his UFC debut last November getting a standing guillotine versus Daryl Horcher. Very unorthodox type of choke that he got Horcher with, but it was effective and it got the tap, and it was showed some real creativity and some risky the ability to take risks even in his UFC debut against a seasoned guy like Daryl Horcher. So really impressive, Roosevelt Roberts. He's a real tall and long guy. He's on the feet. He has short, quick outbursts of offense where he's waiting, and then he explodes out with a combo. And his distance management looks very good. He looks confident in it. He'll come in and out of the combinations very well. And like I said, he looks confident in his defense and in his chin because he's using that head movement and he's coming in and out of those combinations. But and he also has very good wrestling. He likes the body lock takedown. That's how he took down his opponent on the Tuesday Night Contender Series. He will wear you down with ground and pound with top control, and then eventually he will his opponent will give up the sub. So he's not looking for the sub too early, not looking for submission over position. He's definitely wearing his opponents down, ground and pound, and that pressure on top, and then he's forcing his opponents to give up the submission. Now, Thomas Gifford making his UFC debut in this one. So what we've seen from him on the regionals, what I wrote down is he can be double-legged fairly easily. He got taken down in multiple of his fights. The one that rings a bell was his most recent loss to Bryant Whitaker, where he was just taken down every round of that fight and just held down off of it, couldn't get off of his back, really struggled to get up in that one. And that's how most of his losses go. His second most recent loss all the way back in 2014 to Omar Zapata, same type of fight where he was just taken down and couldn't get off his back. But his offensive jiu-jitsu is not bad. Most of his wins actually have come by finish. Specifically, his most recent four of his most recent 5 victories have come by way of guillotine or triangle. So he's got good offensive jiu-jitsu, but in terms of defensive jiu-jitsu, he's lacking a little bit. So I think that's what's going to get him in trouble versus Roosevelt Roberts. And the one thing about Gifford too is on the feet, man, he engages recklessly. He is not taking calculated risks like Roberts is. Roberts is fighting real smart. He's thinking about what he's going to do, and he's timing it out. He's getting a feel for his opponent, and then he explodes with his outburst of offense. But Gifford just blitzes in there with his chin up. His defense does not look very good. And, I just think that Roosevelt Roberts will win this fight in the striking exchanges, and I think he will win on the ground, eventually getting the submission sometime around the 2nd or the 3rd round for Roosevelt Roberts in this one. So Tough debut for Thomas Gifford in this one. I mean, it doesn't really look too UFC level, but regardless, it's going to be a tough fight for him, and I'm picking Roberts to get this one done via late submission. Next fight on the main card in the bantamweight division, we got John Lineker, who is 31-8, taking on Corey Sandhagen, who is 10-1. The opening betting line for this one is John Lineker, the favorite, at -245 to Corey Sandhagen at +175. Right now, over on our affiliated sportsbook, 5 Dimes, we are seeing John Lineker -140 to Sandhagen at +120. So much more action coming in on the underdog Corey Sandhagen in this matchup. I think it's a little bit of a recency bias. Corey Sandhagen has looked, very good lately. He had that incredible come from behind victory versus Yuri Alcantara, where he was rocked with a couple punches on the feet, and then he was taken down, and he was in a deep armbar. I have no idea to this day how he got out of that armbar. I don't think anybody really does. He must be elastic or something like that. So Sandhagen's flexibility and his sub defense, is just off the charts. But he also has, some good offensive jiu-jitsu of his own. He's got real good striking as well. He has good jab. He's got a nice leg kick. He likes going to that jab, left hook to the body, and then following up with the outside leg kick. He's thrown that combination a lot of times in his fights recently. He also likes the left high and the left body kick as well. We saw in the fight against Austin Arnett, his striking was just on full display in that one. He really targets the body, with his punches, with his knees, his kicks, everything. He really, understands how detrimental body shots can be to MMA fighters, and he attacks that a lot, So Sandhagen also, can hit an offensive takedown of his own. He can, get some submissions if he wants to. He actually, submitted one of his recent opponents, and Mario Bautista in that one. He, showed that he can threaten with multiple submissions chained together with, an armbar or a triangle or a guillotine, and he can go from submission to submission until he gets the submission that he wants. And he also has good knees and elbows on the break. So when he comes into those into those clinches, he will get you on the break with those knees and elbows in that Muay Thai style. So I'm really impressed with Sandhagen. But he's fighting a staple of the bantamweight division in John Lineker. You guys know the deal with John Lineker, man. He's got great boxing and pressure and incredible chin, great power. It just keeps his hands low and just marches forward. He's got his own his flaws. He doesn't really check leg kicks. His takedown defense is not very good. He was taken down relentlessly by T.J. Dillashaw in their fight. With outside trips relentlessly and he was also taken down off of a leg kick of his own. But he also took down TJ off of a leg kick as well. So when Sandhagen is throwing those leg kicks in this fight, look for Lineker to be catching them and try to dump Sandhagen on his back. But, Lineker is, he's a little one-dimensional. I think his game is mostly boxing. It's mostly pressure. And Sandhagen is just a much more diverse fighter in this point. I think he's a better kicker. I think he is the better wrestler. He has the better submissions of the two. So I can see why Corey Sandhagen is getting bet down in this fight. And I honestly think that I was thinking a little bit earlier in the week that it would lean in the way of Lineker, but man, as I take this fight, I'm really liking Corey Sandhagen's chances at pulling off the upset in this one. I just think he has more ways to win this fight. I think that he can look to, take Lineker down and maybe snatch up a submission that way, or he can just use his diverse offensive attack with those leg kicks, those knees and elbows, the clinch, and his jab and everything, and look to just outstrike Lineker on the feet, man. If Lineker does not check leg kicks and Sandhagen is digging into that leg with those Muay Thai style skip kicks, it's going to be a tough night for Lineker. His mobility is going to be reduced, and he's going to be eating punches from Sandhagen. But I don't think Sandhagen will knock out Lineker. There is a chance he submits him, but I think this one will actually be, just an impressive all-around performance from Corey Sandhagen when he will win this fight on the scorecards. And Let's look at the odds for that, because I know that I feel like most people would think this fight isn't going to go the distance because, you know, the clash of styles between the two. I think Sandhagen has a great chance of winning a decision. So Sandhagen by decision at plus 412, that is definitely something to keep an eye on in the prop realm of things. But that being said, I'm going to pick Corey Sandhagen to get the upset victory by decision. Next fight is taking place in the light heavyweight division. We got Glover Teixeira, who is 28-7, taking on Ion Cutelaba, who is 14-3. The opening betting line for this one was Cutelaba, the minus 135 favorite, to Glover Teixeira, the minus 105 underdog. Right now, we are seeing Cutelaba, the minus 105 underdog, to Teixeira at minus 115. So a near pick'em in this one. This line movement has been going all over the place. You know, Cutelaba actually was down at minus 160, minus 150 for the past couple weeks, but as fight week has approached, money has been coming in on Glover Teixeira, and I know why, man. I think that plus money on Glover Teixeira would have been great. I think that this is a really close type of fight because I think both guys have weaknesses, and their opponents can capitalize on their weaknesses. They definitely have the skills and the fighting styles to capitalize on the weaknesses. So I'd say Cutelaba's weakness is the wrestling and the takedowns, and the grappling realm of MMA. He was taken down by Gazimov Antigulov 3 times in their last fight, and Antigulov is not a good fighter, man. He's desperate. He dives for those takedowns, and then he does not have much gas. So good thing that Cutelaba didn't get submitted. He was able to get up from those takedowns all 3 times, then eventually finish Antigulov on the feet with some knees and elbows in the first round of their fight. But, in that fight against Misha Cirkunov, Cutelaba was taken down, he was mounted, and guess what? He was arm triangled in the 3rd round of their fight. Now, why is that significant? How did Glover Teixeira win his last fight? It was via arm triangle. In a fight where, against Carl Roberson, he was, almost knocked out cold. He got hit with some hard elbows while he was going for the takedown in that fight. It looked like he could have been out cold for a while, but he resurrected from the dead. He got mount on Robertson shortly after he was rocked, hit him with some ground and pound, and then was able to snatch up that arm triangle submission for the victory. So, just MMA math and things that, man, Teixeira has a good chance to get that same submission as he did, as Cirkunov did. And, Cirkunov is a guy that Teixeira beat. Teixeira, was able to get him on the mat, was able to take his back and then transition him out and then pound him out with punches in the mount for the ground and pound TKO in that one. So, again, if you're looking at MMA math, all signs point to Glover Teixeira. So Teixeira is, he's got that good boxing fundamentals, but man, he's just getting up there in age. He's getting up there in experience. He's taking a lot of damage, and I just don't think he's very sharp on the feet anymore. He's definitely lost his speed. He's become a little more chinny. He plots forward a little more and doesn't have as good footwork, but he's kind of transitioned to more of a grappling based fighter where he's trying to get the takedown, he's trying to pound you out with punches, or he's trying to submit you. So I think that's what he's going to be trying to do to Cutelaba in this fight. Cutelaba is going to be looking to keep this fight standing, but man, his takedown defense is not very good, and even his striking I don't think is very good either. I think he just wings punches for the most off. He doesn't really have too much, he doesn't really calculate his offense very well. He's kind of just stands in front of you and wings punches without much technique. Or, he did look good in the clinch against Antigulov with those knees and elbows, but regardless from that, I have not seen much, clean striking from Cutelaba. So I'm going to side with good old Glover Teixeira in this one. I think that he will get the takedown in this one. I think he could, stall rounds out, win it on top. I think he could try to get the submission on Cutelaba or go for that, get mount and just ground and pound Cutelaba for a finish. So I'm going to pick Glover to get this one done via finish as well. Alright, the next fight takes place in the welterweight division. We have Mike Perry, who is 12-4, taking on Alex Oliveira, who is 26-1. The opening betting line for this one was Alex Oliveira, the favorite, at minus 175 to Mike Perry at plus 135. right now over on our affiliated sportsbook 5 Dimes, we see Alex Oliveira minus 175 to Mike Perry at plus 155. So two-way action coming in on this fight. I'd say a little more on Alex Oliveira's way, pushing him from. Actually, no, he's been the same all week at minus 175. You know, a little bit of early money did come in on him, pushing him down to 2-1 for a while. But since then, a little bit more action coming in on Mike Perry, and I expect that more action will be coming in on Mike Perry as the fight night gets closer. So, you know, both of these guys are absolute madmen. You know, how can you not be fans of both of these guys? Oliveira is personally one of my favorite fighters on the roster just because he brings it every time, man. He's a fast starter. He goes balls to the wall. He takes risks. He's reckless. He hits hard. He has good submissions, you know, great kicks. You know, he just is pretty much rarely in a boring fight. You know, Mike Perry, you know, he has the same intentions. You know, he wants to go out there and swing and bang, but he has gotten, you know, caught up with more technical strikers lately. You know, the Alan Jouban laws, even the Max Griffin laws. Max Griffin, not really a technical striker by any stretch of the means, but Perry was, for the most part, outstruck in that fight. He actually got dropped pretty hard by Max Griffin in the second round of their fight. And Perry also lost his last fight via submission versus Cowboy. He, for some reason, went for an offensive takedown versus Cowboy, got on top, was swept, and then armbarred by you know, the superior grappler in Cowboy. So a little bit of an IQ issue in that fight, honestly. But, you know, Perry is definitely getting smarter. You saw that in the fight against Paul Felder. He was able to, you know, win his first decision in that fight where he fought, you know, smart for 3 rounds. He, you know, definitely was still brawling a little bit, but his boxing was on point. He, you know, he's got, you know, power in both of his hands. He kind of plots forward a little bit, doesn't really check leg kicks too much, but he, you know, he's definitely a very talented boxer of his own right. But, you know, Oliveira, you know, he just comes forward wild, man, and he's got power in both of his hands as well. His left hand is, you know, a piston. He's dropped a lot of his opponents with that left hand. He's got some good defensive grappling as well. You know, he defended the back attack from Gunnar Nelson in round 1 of their fight, where Gunnar had his back taken, the body triangle locked in, but Oliveira was able to reverse position and get up on top and then smash Gunnar Nelson with some ground and pound and win the first round of that fight. So I really trust Oliveira's sub-defense, you know, not thinking that Perry's going to submit him at all, but, you know, eventually that fight did technically end by submission, but regardless, he defended the back take well. So, you know, this fight's going to be a brawl, you know, Oliveira definitely has the better overall, better MMA game. I think he has more tools on the feet to win this fight with. But, you know, that brawling type of fight favors Mike Perry. You know, Oliveira got into a brawl with Medeiros and he lost. And, you know, he's definitely lost other brawls too. Let's see if I'll pull up his record and see if I can get some examples of it. You know, he came up on top of the brawl with Carlos Condit. He won that fight. He brawled with Gunnar Nelson. He lost that one. You know, he's got triangle by Cerrone, submitted by Burns. But, man, yeah, Oliveira has fought, you know, extremely high-level competition. He's come up with some good wins in them. He's definitely fought the better competition than Perry. So, you know, it's going to be a hell of a fucking fight. I really expect it to be entertaining. You know, if Oliveira can hit offensive takedowns of his own and try to win rounds on top, you know, some ground and pound. He did that versus Carlos Condit for a little bit. I think that would actually be a smart game plan for Oliveira, to try to use his grappling in this one to put Perry on his back and to win rounds in the grappling. But I don't think Oliveira fights that way. He does not fight the smart way. He doesn't, you know, he's not going out there with a game plan necessarily. He's not going out there trying to fight the smartest way to make sure he wins the fight via decision, man. He's going out there to fucking fight, and that's what I love about him, man. He's unpredictable. It makes, you know, betting on him a little bit you know, hectic at sometimes. I don't think I would really bet on his money lines too much because I am a fan of the guy, and he's unpredictable. He's, you know, I wouldn't say he's too trustworthy either, especially betting on him as a favorite. So with this fight likely ending up being a brawl, with Oliveira definitely having the worst chin than Perry. And I think Perry probably hits harder of the two gentlemen as well, man. I like Mike Perry's chances in this fight, especially at plus 155 odds. I think I actually probably will lock in a bet at plus 155 pretty soon here on Perry. Just trying to see where the line is going to go. Like I predicted, it will probably go more in favor of Perry. He's a fan favorite. He's more likely to get that action coming on him more towards fight day. So I might have to lock in a play on Perry because I like his chances in the brawl. But I'm just expecting a really good fight in this one, and I'm gonna go out on a limb and pick Perry to win this fight. I'm gonna go by knockout in the second round. It actually wouldn't be surprising me too much though if that fight end up going to the decision, despite the odds being heavily stacked against it going to the cards. I think both gentlemen have a chance of canceling one another out and end up being a decision. So just keep that in mind. Moving on to the co-main event of the evening in the heavyweight division, we have Greg Hardy, who is 3-1, taking on Dmitry Smolyakov, who is 9-2. The opening betting line for this one was Hardy as the minus 265 favorite to Smolyakov as the plus 185 underdog. Right now, over on 5 Dimes, we are seeing Hardy minus 335 to Smolyakov plus 275. So much more action coming in on the favorite. Greg Hardy, I do not disagree at all. We got two pretty low-level opponents in this one. Hardy is the former NFL star. Make his transition over to MMA in the past couple of years, and of course his domestic violence issues made him a big conversation in the sport. He's pretty much primarily a boxer. He doesn't really have much other skills in MMA. He just comes out there just trying to swang, just trying to throw bombs. Besides just throwing haymakers, that's really Greg Hardy's pretty much entire game. He doesn't have good footwork. He, especially during exchanges when he gets excited and the adrenaline's going, he does not have that discipline yet where he keeps his feet set and he fights smart. He's not very concerned with defense at all. He trusts his chin. He's not really. He's worried about offense, and that's pretty much it. He's not worrying about covering up punches or moving his head too much. He's worried about throwing bombs, as I've already alluded to. But so he got in his fight against Alan Crowder, though, his UFC debut. Man, what a rough fight that was. Let me tell you, he looked like he was gassing a little bit in round 1. He was taken down in round 2. Then he eventually kneed his opponent while he was down, and then eventually got himself disqualified, losing that fight, giving the victory to Alan Crowder in that one, especially as a big favorite in that one. He was like a minus 450 favorite heading into that fight with Crowder. So, I was on Crowder in that fight. Not only did I know that the hype was behind Greg Hardy, and that alone was worth a bet on the other side as that big underdog, but Crowder had decent MMA skills. He knew how to hit a takedown. He knew how to, clinch. He knew how to, defense on the feet. So that's why I was on Crowder in that one. But the opponent this time around, Dmitry Smolyakov, I honestly think is a little bit worse than Crowder. He has no technique on the feet, man. This guy, he looks like a kid on the playground who's like, what, let's go, come on, you want to fight, come on. Like, they have all this nervous energy, and their arms are flailing, but they're not throwing anything. It doesn't look like they know what they're doing. Their feet aren't set. Like, come on, you want to go, let's go. So that's what I got from watching Smolyakov fight. When he gets hit, he freaks out and runs away. He high guards and runs out of there. He has no defense. He does not look too comfortable in there. In his fight against who the fuck was it? He was breathing so hard 2 minutes into this fight. Versus Luis Henrique de Silva. He was breathing so hard 2 minutes into this fight that his mouthpiece was falling out of his mouth. He was on the ground and the fucking mouth guard was coming out. He was on the feet, his mouth guard was coming out. He was so hard that the mouth guard was just flying out of his mouth. Just absolutely hilarious. You could see his stomach. You could see it, like the huge huff and puff airs that breaths of air that he was trying to take in that fight after, just a few minutes of fighting. He eventually lost that fight via rear naked choke. So, in terms of defensive grappling, Smolyakov really doesn't look like he's knowing what he's doing at all. He gets stuck in mount. He can't elbow escape. He can't get off his back. He can't stuff a takedown. He gets stuck in the turtle position. He taps the chokes right away. He also hasn't fought in the UFC in 28 months. His last loss would come in via ground and pound TKO to Cyril Asker. He was just stuck in mount in that one, couldn't get out, and got ground and pound finished. He did take a fight recently, though, in Russia, where apparently he won by Kimura. There is no video of this fight. We don't know how long the fight lasted, but we do know that his opponent, this guy, Evgeny Bolva, I watched one of his fights just to get a sense of what he was like, and he's, a total bum. No skill at all in MMA, just a bouncer or something like that from the Ukraine who's fighting over in Romania or some shit like that. So don't hold that win in too high regard at all. I honestly think that Smolyakov is being brought in here as a lamb for slaughter for Greg Hardy. They looked at Greg Hardy's last fight and they said, holy shit, we need to get this guy a win. We gave him what we thought was the worst heavyweight on the roster in Crowder, and he still lost. We got to go and recruit a worse heavyweight than Crowder, and we got to bring him in here so we can get Hardy a win. They look through the database, they say, oh, remember that guy Smolyakov, remember how bad he sucked, he came in here and he lost 2 fights right away, let's get him back in there. That's what they did. So they brought in Smolyakov. He's now facing Hardy in this co-main event, and it's a fucking travesty that this is co-main event. A lot of the times it doesn't really matter, but you're taking the spotlight away from hard-earned fighters who earn their spot to be in a co-main event. Mike Perry and Alex Oliveira deserve to be in a co-main event. They put their time in the regionals. They had success in the UFC, up and downs in the UFC. They're extremely exciting fighters. These guys, you're basically having 2 inexperienced big heavyweight bums who you're hoping they come in, they swing it out, and it's a quick finish for Greg Hardy, but it could turn into a slot fest real fast, just like that Allen Crowder fight did. So I'm picking Greg Hardy to win this one. I think he will spark Smolyakov in the first round, but not expecting much from this fight. In the main event of the evening, we got, in the middleweight division, Ronaldo Jacare Souza, who is 26-6, taking on Jack the Joker Hermansson, who is 19-4. The opening betting line for this one was Jacare minus 175 to Hermansson plus 135. Right now we are seeing Souza minus 210 to Hermansson at plus 175. What an intriguing main event in this one. It was a short notice replacement fight for Jack Hermansson. It was supposed to be the rematch between Jacare and Yoel Romero, but Romero was forced to pull out due to who knows what, and Hermansson just coming off that fresh arm and guillotine victory over David Branch back in Philadelphia on March 30th. Comes in 4 weeks later and is taking on Jacare in this fight. So I expect Hermansson to be in shape. I think that their cardios will be fairly evenly matched. Because Jacare knew he was training for that 5-round fight for a little bit longer than Hermansson did, but Hermansson, preparing back-to-back 3-round fights, I expect his cardio to be in really good shape. And I think Hermansson will have the better cardio if this fight gets into the 3rd, 4th, 5th round. So that'll be something to consider. If this fight gets into those deeper rounds, Jacare does tend to fade a little bit. We have not seen him in the championship rounds, I don't think, in the UFC ever. Maybe, is that true? He has been scheduled for his fair share of main events, but I believe he has never went the 5-round distance in the UFC. He definitely did back in Strike Force, but I do not think he has. Luke Rockhold, Tim Kennedy, he went to the 5 rounds with those guys, but not in the UFC. So I don't expect this one to go to the decision either. But if it does, I think that Hermansson, his cardio edge will be big. But if cardio becomes a factor in this fight, if Jacare does gas out in that 3rd round, I think Hermansson has a better chance at finishing him in the 4th or 5th rounds than I do of Hermansson winning by decision. So let's start with Hermansson. He's got real quick, unorthodox striking. He's jolting in and out. He's real light on the feet. He comes in and he thwacks you with the leg kick. He doesn't have much in the boxing realm with things, but his movement It's hard to time, man. You know, for a guy who's a counterpuncher like Jacare, who, you know, in his last fight had Weidman, who was willing to stand and trade right in front of him. It's going to be a different story this time. Hermansson's going to be moving all around. He's going to be bouncing in and out. He's going to be hard to hit. And Hermansson also has, you know, just great ground game, man. He's got great sub defense. You know, we saw that in the Talis Leites fight, 3rd degree black belt. Talis Leites had him in some deep submissions, some guillotines. Some head and arm chokes. I forget what else. Maybe a Darce choke as well. He had him in some deep submissions, and Hermansson did not tap, and he fought his way out of that with the fucking broken rib too. You know, the dude is just tough as they come, and if he gets on top of you, his top control and his ground and pound is insane, man. He calls himself the best ground and pound in the UFC, and it's hard to disagree with him, man. He's gotten some vicious ground and pound victories in the past. Most recently over Talis Leites, he smashed Gerald Michart with ground and pound, eventually opened up the submission in that one. And in his last fight against Jiu-Jitsu black belt, Renzo Gracie Jiu-Jitsu black belt, Dave Branch, he whipped Branch to the ground. It wasn't even like a traditional wrestling takedown. He literally just like spun him in a circle so fast that he took him down, got side control on him, wrapped up that arm in guillotine, and tapped Dave Branch in 40 seconds. He just ran through Dave Branch, you know. So the momentum is, I think, definitely on Hermansson's side in this one. You know, he's picked up 3 finishes in a row over, really good competition. He is, he's taking this fight on short notice. He's, excited for the opportunity. Jacare, on the other hand, I think he's a little bit frustrated. I think that he, has wanted that UFC title shot forever. He's been winning, and then he has a setback, and then he, racks up 3 or 4 more wins, but he's always fell short of that UFC title shot. And, he wants that title shot bad. He says that if I keep winning fights and I'm not getting a title shot, I'm out of here. I think he said until the end of the year, if I don't get one, then I'm done. So, I understand where the guy's coming from. It must be frustrating because the middleweight division has been on hold for so long. You had the whole Bisping versus GSP thing for a while. Then Whitaker was injured, and then Romero fights, and the constant Whitaker injuries, and the middleweight title has had a lot of interim titles lately. It's been very frustrating for Jacare, and he's been left out for all that. So he's definitely got to be frustrated at this point in his career. And he's vocally said that, so there's no doubt about that. But I do not think that's going to take away from his motivation. I think he's still going to come in here, the Jacare that we all know and love. He's, I think one of the best middleweights of all time. Top 3, top 5 middleweights of all time. Anderson Silva, Luke Rockhold, Gegard Mousasi, Jacare. These guys are the best middleweights of all time for sure. And, Jacare has wins over some of those guys as well. So, of course, he's got the great jiu-jitsu pedigree. He doesn't really use it much lately. He has gotten some submissions, over, fucking Chris Camozzi or Tim Bosch or something like that. I don't really count those submissions as too highly. Those guys are low-level grapplers who were just pretty much ran through by Jacare. And, he wasn't able to submit Kelvin Gastelum in their fight, He was able to take down Yoel Romero in the 3rd round of their fight, though. So, Jacare he can hit takedowns. He he's got that great jiu-jitsu pedigree. He's more of a position type of guy. So if he takes you down, he will just wear you out with position instead of going for submissions necessarily. And Jacare is just making improvements in his boxing. His boxing has gotten tremendously better in the past year or so than it ever has been before. And it's just his entire striking. He head kicked Derek Brunson, eventually getting a knockout in that one. He was hitting Chris Weidman with those overhand rights to the head, and then digging that left hook to the body. He was showing some high guard, some head movement, working on his boxing defense versus Weidman. And Jacare's got, a really, really good chin. He's only been rocked by a few people. He's been dropped by Kelvin, got knocked out by Whitaker. He got dropped by Romero by that spinning back fist, but he's got a hell of a chin on him. I don't think Hermansson will have much luck at penetrating that chin of Jacare. it's just going to be hard for Hermansson on paper for him to win this. On paper you'd never think that he'd be able to submit Jacare because Jacare is a much higher belt. Much more jiu-jitsu experience, and it's going to be hard for Hermansson to test that chin of Jacare just because he's so tough. He's got good boxing defense. It's going to be a tough fight for Hermansson to win, but just something about the momentum of these guys is leading me to believe that Hermansson is going to pull it off. There's nothing made sense about him whipping Dave Branch down to the canvas and arming guillotine in the black belt in 40 seconds. That fight didn't make sense. The dude is going out there, he's doing some pretty crazy shit out there in the octagon, and I just I'm siding with Hermansson's momentum in this one. I think the dude just finds he has a will to win. That fight against Tass Latis, 95% of the roster would have quit in those situations. They would have tapped to those chokes with the broken rib, but not Jack Hermansson. Jack Hermansson, one of the toughest guys on the roster. I think that he is going to be hard to put away for Jacare in this one. I think if the fight stays standing, then Jacare does have a good chance at outboxing Hermansson. But like I said, Hermansson's not there to be hit too much. I think Hermansson's going to be trying to make this fight in clinch, a lot of scrambles, go for takedowns, try to snatch up a sub in transition. And I just slightly side with Hermansson. Even though, like I said, even though on paper everything leads you to believe that Jacare should come out of this fight the winner. And I've seen way more people on Jacare this week than I have Hermansson. There's just something that's leading me to believe that Hermansson will pull it off. He's had this huge resurgence from his career in the past year, picking up those 3 finishes in a row, and he's looking to make it 4 this weekend versus Jacare. So I don't know how Hermansson's gonna get it done. I'm gonna be I'm gonna go against the grain and say that Hermansson will submit Jacare in this fight. Sounds crazy, Jacare the 6th degree jiu-jitsu black belt, but I don't know. Hermansson, man, is just impressive. I've been super impressed with him. Really enjoyed watching his last 3 fights, and that's definitely coming in a little bit to me making this pick. I'm not. I enjoyed the hell out of Jacare's most recent fights though. That Kelvin fight, I thought he won. Rounds 1 and 3 of that fight. I thought that he won rounds 2 and 3 versus Romero. I thought that he looked great knocking out Brunson. He looked great knocking out Weidman. The dudes look terrific lately. I think that these are 2 high level middleweights that are colliding into each other at some of the best times in their career. I really can't wait for this matchup, and I'm picking the Joker to get it done. I'm gonna go by 4th round submission. So that's going to do it for the UFC Sunrise preview. We analyzed and predicted all 13 fights going down this Saturday night in Sunrise, Florida, starting at 5:30 p.m. The prelims, then the ESPN prelims start at 7, and the main card on ESPN Plus at 9 p.m. So with that being said, we're just going to quickly recap the UFC Russia card that went down this past weekend, like we do at the end of every Martian MMA podcast. Starting things off, Magomed Mustafayev spinning back kick knocked out Rafael Fiziev in 90 seconds into the first round of this fight. Incredible performance in Mustafayev coming off that 2-year layoff. And Fiziev looked a little tentative in there, and Mustafayev made him pay. So, nice performance there. Oleg Chaytuk and Antagulov, just a hilarious fight there. Antagulov desperate as fuck with the takedowns, but McCall was hitting him with those punches, rocking him, dropping him 3 times, eventually getting the finish in that one. Shamil Abdurmanikov finishing Martian Tybura in the second round of this one. Tybura looked terrible in this fight. Abdurmanikov looked good, was hitting him with some boxing, and eventually finished him with some punches in this one. Jacare versus Lecco de Silva, competitive back and forth fight. I think Silva had the advantage early on. Looked like he was winning the fight, but then looked like he maybe gassed out a little bit. Jacare reverse position, and he got the submission in this one. Next fight, Sultan Aliyev beat Kita Nakamura 3-0. Just pitched the shutout in that one. Kita looked pretty bad. Mosavar Evlev winning that fight via, I think he had a point taken. Illegal knees in round 2. He needed an opponent down. But he won that fight 3-0. Actually, I think he won 10-8 one round. Don't remember which one, though. Looked very impressive in that fight. Krzysztof Jotko, beat the living shit out of Alan Abadovsky in this one. Just 30-25, 30-26 type of fight. Roxanne Modafferi beat Antonia Shevchenko. Great fight from her, coming through as the big underdog. She was able to, Shevchenko came out looking good in round 1, lightened Modafferi up on the feet, winning that round. Modafferi was able to get the takedown in round 2, win the second round. Round 3, Shevchenko started to look good on the feet again, started winning the round. Then it ended up on the ground. Shevchenko was on top, looking like she was on her way to winning that third round. But Modafferi was able to reverse position with the sweep, and then get on top for the rest of the round, winning that third round, 2-1. Just a great fight, down to the wire type of fight. Very happy to see Roxanne pick up that victory in that one. I let you all down with my pick of Marcelo Gome. He got knocked out in 66 seconds. The Fight Night Global Polovic was back. We were not counting on that. We were counting on the Alistair Overeem Polovic to show up in this fight. But no, the Fight Night Global guy showed up, and he smoked Gome in one round. Makhachev and Tsartukyan had a very competitive back-and-forth grappling fight. Real pleasure to watch in that one. But like we predicted, Makhachev was just a step ahead the entire fight in the grappling exchanges. And Alistair Overeem defeating Alexei Oleinik via knees and punches. Oleinik was looking desperate for trying to close the distance in this fight, but Overeem was just smashing him with knees over and over again. Oleinik was not successful in his guard pulls or any attempts to get that Ezekiel choke, and eventually Alistair Overeem made him pay with knees in that fight. So very impressive performance from Overeem, and it was a very solid card from top to bottom. And that's going to do it for the podcast this week. We broke down all 13 fights, and we recapped UFC Russia from last week. So that's going to be all for episode 58 of the Martian MMA podcast. And we'll be back next week before the UFC card going down in Ottawa, Canada. I'll see you guys next week. Peace.